Most women believe that peace is the absence of pain, that if the storm calms, if the chaos stills, if the voices around them soften into praise, then finally, they will be allowed to breathe. But peace does not come dressed in silence. It comes wrapped in flame, and the woman who truly seeks it must be willing to burn. Imagine her, the woman no longer afraid to sit inside her own shadows. She doesn't flinch when the memories come. She does not retreat when her chest tightens with the ache of abandonment or betrayal. She knows now that pain is not punishment. Pain is the torch that shows her what still lives inside, unseen, unheard, unclaimed. Stoicism is not the absence of feeling. It is the refusal to be ruled by it. And Seneca, whose words echo like steel across centuries, never once promised that peace was gentle. He spoke of the furnace, of the man or the woman, forged by discipline, by facing not what they wish the world to be, but what it is, the unpolished, unsentimental truth. Most flee from it. She walks into it, bare-armed and wide-eyed. There is something mythic about the woman who ceases to run. She does not beg the world to understand her anymore. She has stared into the abyss and recognized herself. Not the curated self, not the mask she wore to please, but the raw being beneath, the one who can cry and still be powerful. The one who can be angry and not lose her grace, the one who can shatter and rebuild. Modern psychology calls it shadow integration. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so she does the work. She gathers her rage, her longing, her terror of being unseen, and holds it in her bare hands, not to destroy it, but to know it, to speak to it as an old companion. She learns the names of her demons and calls them home. No more exile, no more pretending she is smaller than she is. Peace begins when illusion ends. You were never meant to be kept inside a pristine idea of perfection. You were born to confront the chaos, to remember that life owes you no comfort, only the chance to endure and emerge sovereign. Seneca did not speak to the cowardly spirit. He spoke to the one who bleeds, but keeps walking, who loses everything and still whispers, "I am not done." What would you think if I told you that suffering isn't your enemy? That the betrayal you still replay in your head was the very thing meant to wake you? That peace is not found in control, but in surrendering to the parts of yourself you were taught to hide. There is no real power in pretending you are healed. The power is in telling the truth and still loving yourself anyway. She begins to feel it the moment she stops fighting what is, the grief that still lingers, the shame that still coils around her spine like a snake, the self-doubt that claws at her voice. She names them, she sits with them, she lets them speak, and in doing so, she robs them of their power to haunt. You have two choices. You can keep chasing serenity like a phantom, only when the job is perfect, only when the relationship is stable, only when the mirror smiles back. Or you can learn to breathe in the middle of the fire, to close your eyes and know you are still here. You are still whole, even broken, even aching. There is something magnetic about the woman who refuses to abandon herself, who is no longer ashamed of her hunger, her ambition, her wounds, her softness, her fury. She does not seek to be palatable. She seeks to be true. Seneca taught that the wise man adapts himself to the world. The fool demands the world adapt to him. And so she adapts, not by shrinking, but by alchemizing. She uses pain as her philosopher's stone. She doesn't run from the parts of her that were once too much. She studies them, becomes their master, and in doing so, becomes unshakable. This is not about avoiding suffering. This is about choosing not to be defined by it, to no longer see every wound as a verdict, but as initiation. The fire she feared would consume her was the very fire meant to cleanse. There is a moment in every soul's journey when she realizes no savior is coming, no apology will unbreak the betrayal. No hand will pull her from the pit of her own despair. And in that moment, she has a choice: collapse or rise, not in defiance, but in acceptance, not to return to who she was, but to become who the fire demands. Modern therapy speaks of self-worth, of boundaries and reparenting, but the ancients knew another language. They spoke of fortitude, of inner citadels that no insult could breach, of temperance, not as repression, but as supreme power, where the passions serve, but do not rule. And this woman, carved by disappointment, begins to feel it, the slow, relentless building of her own empire within. She does not need to be loud, to be formidable. The quiet ones often carry the deepest fire. Her strength is not in how much she can control, but how much she can release. She no longer begs for life to be easy. She asks only for the strength to meet it exactly as it comes. The modern world teaches you to distract, to numb, to scroll, to buy, to run. It tells you discomfort is wrong, that everything painful must be medicated or buried. But the woman who truly awakens does the opposite. She stops distracting. She watches the ache rise in her chest and welcomes it like a visitor. She asks it what it came to teach. This is not suffering for suffering's sake. It is the reclamation of sacred attention. When you can be fully present with your own pain, you are no longer ruled by it. You become the observer, the keeper of meaning. You begin to see that every heartbreak carved out space inside you, not for bitterness, but for wisdom. Seneca knew this when he wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." This is the nature of the fire. It does not ask your permission to burn away the false. It only asks your consent to remain inside it long enough to see what survives. Most never make it that far. They exit too early. They mistake discomfort for misalignment. They flee at the first sign of inner resistance, but not her. She knows. If the wound feels unbearable, it means it's speaking the truth. And she leans in. She begins to understand the patterns. How often she loved just to be chosen. How many times she betrayed herself for peace. How many masks she wore just to be palatable, desirable, acceptable. But those masks are melting now. Fire is honest. It takes what cannot last. The ego resists this purification. It fears death more than truth. But the soul, the soul was always waiting for this exact moment. The moment the performance ends. The moment the story cracks open and lets the light in. If you've ever wondered why you repeat the same wounds, why every relationship seems to echo the last, why the voice in your head still whispers that you're not enough, it's not because you're broken. It's because the lesson was never learned, and what is not transformed is always repeated. So you sit, not because you enjoy the heat, but because you've outgrown the illusion that you can avoid it. And slowly, something shifts. You begin to feel less like a victim and more like a witness. You begin to see the patterns not as punishments, but as messages, as mirrors. Every man or woman who hurt you did not create your pain. They revealed it. They showed you where the wound still lived. And the moment you understand this, you stop needing revenge. You stop needing closure. You no longer ask, "Why did they do this to me?" But rather, "What in me called this forth to be healed?" The fire becomes holy, not just heat, but clarity. It shows you what matters, what stays when the masks fall. It strips you of titles, roles, personas, and leaves only what's real. And in that rawness, there is peace, not the peace of comfort, but of clarity. You begin to walk differently, speak differently. You no longer need to shout to be heard. Your silence carries weight. You stop chasing things just to prove your worth, because you no longer question if you have any. You know now, peace was never something to find. It was something to become. The world does not reward the woman who burns quietly. It rewards the performer, the pleaser, the one who keeps her rage hidden behind a smile. But she, this woman born again in flame, no longer seeks reward. She seeks truth. And truth, as Seneca taught, is rarely comfortable, but always liberating. What she learns in time is that strength is not born in resistance, but in surrender. The world told her that to be powerful, she must always be in control, that to be respected, she must be composed, agreeable, efficient. But the deeper she descends into her own inner wilderness, the more she sees. Control is a cage. It is the armor worn by those afraid to feel. And armor, while it protects, also suffocates. So she takes it off, piece by piece. The facade of certainty, the smile worn to soothe, the silence that swallowed her needs. She removes them all and stands bare in the fire, trembling but unhidden. And there, stripped of performance, she finally breathes. Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That is the crucible, not in becoming better, but in embracing what already is. The envy, the rage, the longing, the shame. Most spend their lives escaping these feelings. She studies them. She becomes fluent in their language. She knows now that to deny them is to deny herself. There is immense beauty in this kind of courage, not the theatrical kind, not the bravery others applaud, but the quiet bravery of the woman who stays when it gets hard, who does not numb, who does not collapse, who dares to feel it all. And still, she chooses love. But this time, it is not the kind of love that empties her. It is not a reaching love, not a begging love, not a love that says, "Please see me so I can see myself." No, this love begins inward. It begins with the parts she once disowned. She holds the girl who was overlooked, the teenager who learned to shrink, the woman who was told her voice was too sharp, her tears too loud, her dreams too wild. She does not shame them. She does not fix them. She welcomes them. And in doing so, she ends the war within. Seneca warned against allowing external things to govern the soul, that he who depends on anything outside himself for peace has already surrendered his freedom. And so, she severs the cords. She stops tying her worth to how much she achieves, how much she gives, how little she needs. She becomes terrifying to those who require her compliance to feel safe. Her calmness unnerves them. Her refusal to over-explain, to justify, to accommodate. They mistake it for arrogance. But it is not pride. It is peace. And peace, when earned through fire, carries the gravity of 1,000 storms survived. She no longer asks life to be fair. She understands that the universe does not trade in fairness. It trades in growth. And growth is never linear. It spirals, it breaks, it returns, it rips open old scars. And still, she says yes. Yes to the mess. Yes to the chaos. Yes to the not knowing. This is the essence of Stoicism, not to suppress the soul, but to sharpen it. To understand that suffering is inevitable, but misery is optional, that one can be devastated and still dignified, that even in her lowest moment, she holds a choice, to abandon herself or to return again and again to her own center. You begin to see what she has become, not invulnerable, but sovereign, not unfeeling, but undisturbed. She laughs differently now, slower, freer. She does not look around the room for approval before she speaks. She does not shrink when her truth offends. She trusts the fire inside her. She knows what it cost to build. And the world begins to shift in her presence, not because it has changed, but because she has. She does not react the way she used to. Where once she would have begged, now she observes. Where once she would have performed, now she waits. There is power in that pause, power in knowing when to speak and when to be silent, when to stay and when to walk away without a word. She has become the fire, not wild, not out of control, but eternal. The kind of flame that does not consume, but illuminates, and it lights the path for others too. Because those who witness her strength begin to question their own chains. They begin to remember who they were before they were taught to be afraid of their own power. The ones who fear her the most are not her enemies, but those still clinging to illusion. Those who live in carefully constructed facades, who have never dared to taste the rawness of their own truth. Her presence unsettles them, not because she attacks, but because she mirrors. She reflects back everything they've buried, the parts they pretend don't exist, the voices they silence with busyness, with perfection, with performance. But she does not flinch from their discomfort. She does not dim her light to soothe fragile egos. She has done that before, and it nearly cost her soul. Now, she walks as a storm in stillness. No need to prove, no desire to control. She knows peace is not what happens when others stop hurting you. Peace is what happens when you stop betraying yourself to keep them comfortable. And betrayal, she understands now, has many faces. Sometimes it is loud, a scream ignored, a truth denied, a wound mocked. But more often, it is quiet. It's the way she once laughed at jokes that cut her, the way she kept forgiving without repentance, the way she silenced her own wisdom because someone else sounded more certain. These small, daily abandonments, they were the deepest kind, and she no longer tolerates them. Seneca wrote that, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." She has faced it, not once, but 1,000 times. And each time she bled a little less. Each time she lost another false identity. Each time she remembered, she is not here to be untouched. She is here to be real. And reality for her is sacred. It is not the curated story, not the highlight reel, not the aesthetic perfection. It is the mess, the ache, the days she wakes up and still doubts herself, but shows up anyway. The conversations where her voice shakes, but she speaks anyway. The tears that fall mid-sentence, and she does not apologize, because truth needs no apology, and vulnerability is not weakness. It is the evidence of life. There is no enlightenment without embodiment, no wisdom without wounds. And she has stopped running from the parts of her that feel too much, too sensitive, too intense, too different. She sees now, those were the parts most alive, most awake, most sacred. The world taught her to suppress them because they could not be controlled. But she is no longer interested in being controlled. You begin to sense the enormity of what she has reclaimed. not just her voice, but her essence, the primal, unedited, unrepentant self. She does not seek to dominate others, but she refuses to be dominated, and this refusal alone makes her dangerous in the best way, a threat to every system that profits off her silence. She is soft in the way a flame is soft, hypnotic, warm, alluring, but touch her with disrespect, and you will learn. Softness does not mean submission. She is tender, but she is not fragile. Her kindness is not permission. Her love is not transaction. She is the woman who knows that forgiveness does not require reconnection, that boundaries do not need explanation, and that peace sometimes sounds like the door closing behind her as she walks away. And yet, beneath the fire, there is stillness. Not the stillness of suppression, but of presence. She does not anticipate the worst, nor fantasize the best. She meets life moment by moment, breath by breath. She trusts herself to respond, not from fear, not from habit, but from alignment. In her presence, you cannot lie, not to her and not to yourself, because she has walked through too many illusions to pretend anymore. She has made peace with her contradictions. She has faced her projections and integrated her shadow. She knows that the monster under the bed was her abandoned self, begging to be seen, and she saw it, loved it, named it, and in doing so, became whole. She no longer waits to be chosen. She is no longer seduced by promises of forever. She knows everything is temporary, every person, every role, every chapter, but her soul, that is eternal. And she no longer fears the ending of things because she has survived too many endings that looked like death, but were, in truth, rebirth. This is what it means to sit in the fire without flinching, not to be unmoved, but to be unbroken, not to be numb, but to be free. And as the world around her continues to spin in noise and need and narrative, she remains still, anchored, undistracted. Because she knows peace was never the absence of pain, it was the presence of her. There comes a moment, late in the night or early in the heart, when she sees it clearly. Every man who left, every wound inflicted, every silence that felt like a scream, it wasn't meant to destroy her. It was meant to awaken her, to strip her down to the marrow so she could remember that peace is not given. Peace is claimed. She thinks back on all the times she begged life to be gentle. All the prayers for safety, for softness, for someone to hold her and never let go. And now, standing in the ruins of who she once was, she understands. Gentleness is not something the world gives. It is something she becomes. A gentleness born of knowing her own power, not fearing it. A softness that is not submission, but strength. One that says, I can destroy, but I choose not to. That is the apex of Stoic philosophy. Not cold indifference, but sovereign grace. A steady hand in chaos. A heart still open, even after it has broken 100 times. Seneca's teachings were never about detachment for its own sake. They were about anchoring to something so deep, so unshakable, that no storm could drag you from it. And she is that anchor now. She no longer fears her own depth. She dives into herself without flinching, through the tangled shame, the unmet grief, the ancient hunger. She swims in the waters most people drown in, not because she is immune, but because she no longer resists the current. The current is her. Jung would call it individuation, the slow, sacred process of becoming whole, of integrating the many selves into one. The wild woman, the child, the sage, the lover, the destroyer, the creator. She no longer picks and chooses which self is acceptable. She no longer amputates pieces of her spirit to be digestible. She wears them all. And because of that, she is free. You begin to feel what it would mean to live like this, to not beg for worth, but embody it, to not apologize for being too much, too deep, too real, to walk into every room not asking for permission, but offering presence. Imagine what would happen if you stopped running from your own fire, if you stopped trying to fix yourself and instead just felt yourself. She has learned the difference between healing and hiding, between choosing peace and avoiding confrontation, between boundaries and walls. And in that clarity, she walks lighter, not because the weight is gone, but because she's no longer carrying what isn't hers. She no longer argues with people who misunderstand her. She no longer performs for those who cannot see. She does not reach down to prove her worth to the ones who fear their own ascent. She simply rises. And the higher she rises, the quieter it becomes, because truth does not scream. Truth does not demand recognition. It simply is, and she has become it. The fire within her no longer burns to destroy. It burns to illuminate, to guide her home again and again to herself. And in that flame, the illusions fall away. She stops calling it love when it's control. She stops calling it loyalty when it's self-erasure. She stops calling it destiny when it's just repetition. And slowly, something else emerges. Not just peace, but joy. A joy not dependent on outcome. Not fragile or fleeting, but rooted. The kind of joy that comes from looking in the mirror and seeing all of yourself. Wounds, shadows, beauty, rage, and smiling. Not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. She laughs more now. The deep, soul-shaking kind. She does not rush. She does not chase. She does not fear solitude because she knows solitude is not loneliness. Solitude is communion with the self, and she has become her own sanctuary. Where others seek distraction, she seeks depth. Where others fear silence, she finds revelation. She walks through her days with an energy that cannot be faked, a presence that cannot be bought, the kind that makes others pause, wonder, question. How did she become like this? And the answer is simple, though not easy. She sat in the fire, and she did not flinch. She stayed when it hurt. She felt what others ran from. She stopped betraying herself to belong. She did the work, daily, silently, ruthlessly. And she emerged, not polished, but real. Not perfect, but whole. And now, when life tests her, and it always will, she does not panic. She does not crumble. She does not reach outside herself for safety. She closes her eyes, breathes deep, and remembers everything she needs, she already is. There is a sacred defiance in her now, not the noisy rebellion of someone still seeking attention, but the quiet, immovable power of a woman who has stopped needing anything from those who once held her worth hostage. She has outgrown the need to be chosen, outgrown the performance of goodness, outgrown the exhausting habit of proving. She does not want to be liked if it costs her truth. She does not want to be understood if understanding demands she shrink. Her soul no longer negotiates with her wounds. This is not arrogance. This is clarity. She has walked through the underworld of herself and returned crowned, not by others, but by the deep knowing that she belongs to no one but herself. The fire did not just burn away the lies, it revealed the bones of her essence. And now, she stands on those bones, not brittle, but unbreakable. You may wonder what she sacrificed to get here. The answer is everything that was never real. The performance, the addiction to validation, the illusion that if she was just enough, beautiful enough, agreeable enough, quiet enough, someone would stay. She buried those myths in the fire and sang as they turned to ash. She no longer worships at the altar of acceptance. She has made a temple of her own becoming. This is the wisdom the ancients knew, that adversity is not punishment, but invitation, that the soul matures in grief more than in praise, that it is not ease, but endurance that makes a woman sovereign. Seneca did not teach to harden the heart, but to liberate it, to unchain it from the chaos of external circumstance. And so, she has learned to master what can be mastered: herself, her thoughts, her breath, her reactions, her presence. The rest she releases. She no longer grasps for what isn't meant. No more begging. No more waiting for apologies that won't come. No more hoping someone else will see her worth. She sees it. She carries it like armor, not to shield, but to shine. There is power in not needing, not in the disconnection of the cold, but in the warmth of knowing that your worth was never contingent on another's gaze. When she loves now, it is clean, without hooks, without desperation. She gives freely, not to earn, but to express, because her love is not a contract. It is a mirror of her freedom. She has rewritten the narrative. No longer the damsel, no longer the martyr, no longer the fixer. She is the flame, the forge, the force. She does not chase. She does not beg. She invites. She chooses. And what cannot meet her where she stands, she blesses and releases. And oh, how many things she has released. People who could not hold her truth. Stories that kept her small. Patterns she clung to because they were familiar. Identities that felt safe but suffocated her soul. She gave them all to the fire, and now only what is real remains. She has learned to trust the quiet, the in-between, the sacred pause before the next becoming. She no longer fears the void because she knows that void is the birthplace of power. The silence before the song, the dark before the dawn. The moment when the phoenix exhales her last breath and the ember begins to glow. When people ask how she became this woman, this presence that commands without force, that holds without clinging, that loves without losing herself, they expect a dramatic story, a defining moment. But the truth is more brutal, more holy. She chose it every day, in the smallest moments, when it was boring, when it was painful, when no one was watching. She chose to stop abandoning herself, and in doing so, she became the kind of woman who cannot be manipulated, cannot be owned, cannot be broken. Not because she is hard, but because she is whole. This is the peace she craved, not the peace of avoidance, not the shallow calm of control, but the peace of self-possession, the kind that remains when everything else falls apart, the kind you can feel in her voice, in her gaze, in her breath. And now she walks differently, with that ancient stillness, that wild wisdom, that fire-lit grace. She is no longer at war with herself. She does not fight to be seen. She sees, she knows, and that is enough. She moves not with fear, but with certainty. Not the certainty that the path will be smooth, but that she will meet it with everything she's become. The discipline of a Stoic, the depth of a mystic, the heart of a warrior, the softness of a soul no longer at odds with its shadow.